welcome back everyone to our last and final episode of this entire mental health podcast series. So today is going to be about all of the questions that you guys asked. So we put up this, anonymous question link for to gather all of your questions, and today we will be addressing them. Actually, quite pretty excited to see what's in store for us today.
Yes.
We shall look at it. So, what will be the first one?
The first question that we have is I'm so busy with assignments and exams. I feel like I have no time to take care of my mental health or to go for counseling. How do I go about this? I think we all relate when we were students.
I
Been
have
there.
no time.
It feels like because the priority at that time is to just get the work done, right?
Mm.
Then you feel like you don't have time to do anything else, or doing anything else is considered useless.
Yeah.
Not being productive.
It's like waste of time, wasting your
Mm.
time, right? And that's that thing that the productive, that word sometimes irks me so much. Like, what is productive? If I'm lying on the floor doing absolutely nothing, but it's useful to me mentally and I'm resting. It's productive, but like productive for most of them nowadays. It's like productive. I must be doing something. I need to have a tangible result.
As a student, it's very easy to just see like doing my assignments, studying, doing anything study related. That's the only thing that's productive.
And that's when all this like guilt kicks in also. There's this term productivity guilt. You are taking rest, but that you're not actually resting because your mind is constantly thinking about the mountain of tasks that needs to be done, because the assignments and everything takes the priority list. Like in the list of priorities, that's the first at the top, right? So everything else takes the back seat. Like sleep also takes the back seat. It'll be like, yeah, sacrifice sleep, just get it done, get it out of the way.
And maybe it's important to realize why it's important to prioritize your mental health as a student, because if this takes a back seat and then you can't focus, you can't perform, so you spend hours and hours studying all the time only to maybe blank out on your exam or not be able to get your assignment done. So maybe it's about realizing that it is important to prioritize your basic needs and your mental health and things like that in this process.
So that's true. Like, so basically, like what you said, right? The self-care aspect of it, to be able to prioritize small pockets of time to give yourself that break, 15 minutes to get a glass of water, have something to eat, and sit there and just let your brain rest. Then counts for a lot in like 24 hours of a day. It just helps you kind of refresh and just sort of stop for a little while so you don't overclock. It's actually like a computer. You're not overclocking your CPU and giving it a break, because then the computer breaks down as well, like burns out. I had not a colleague, I had a uni mate actually, whose laptop didn't catch on fire because they didn't switch it off.
Oh my god!
If it happens in real life, then maybe we will take it seriously, take rest seriously. Like, oh, I'm catching on fire, time to rest.
Yeah.
My fingers are burning. I think I need a break.
One you brought up about tangible things when it comes to productive, because we always measure something, even productivity, with something that's tangible. So things like how many hours I spent studying. So you set aside 5 hours to study, but did you actually study for the entire 5 hours? Be real. So that's not exactly productive. So even if say you set aside 25 minutes to study and 5 minutes and for a quick break, and then you get back into say another 25 minutes of studying, that could be productive.
It
But
could be more productive actually.
in fact, yeah.
We're not saying that it doesn't work for some people. Some people do that. Like, they really can sit down and like maybe do 3 or 4 hours straight, and they really do absorb. But I found that the majority usually maybe about 2 hours max. And then you do need a break. You do need a break, because then you just kind of stop really absorbing like whatever you read it. You read it, but it's very likely, like, if you're trying to recount it later, you're not gonna remember it. That particular aspect of it is it's more about finding what works for you rather than trying to work with what you think is the ideal.
Yes, reflect on how effective, what is your attention span. Like after one point you feel like you're just looking at words and nothing is going in, and that's a sign that maybe, just maybe, you need a break, even if it's like 5 or 10
You
minutes.
just go toilet break, get a glass of water.
Coffee run, very important.
Mental health walk.
Mental health walk.
walk.
Yeah. It is very different for everyone, and it's about finding what works for you specifically. And I think that is where, like, if you don't really know what works for you, then that's where you can always speak to us. That's where you come in for counseling, which leads to the second part of this question of I have no time for counseling. It's 1 hour once a week. Maybe by creating that schedule and realizing that it may not be productive to study like 5-6 hours in a row, you can allocate that 1 hour to make a session. Maybe making it in advance helps to also hold you accountable that next week I do have this one appointment on like a Tuesday afternoon, and I can manage my time around that.
Yeah.
So that's something that could help with.
I like that idea because it is eventually when we say we don't have time for something, what we're actually saying is that it is not a priority for me to make time for it. That is most of the time the case when we say like I don't have time for exercising. Most of the time in that maybe 1 hour to exercise or for mental health counseling or for this and that, most of the time what we are doing is it's not a priority, but it does get filled up with other things, and that could very well be things like doom scrolling. We do that quite a bit, right? But next time you catch yourself saying I don't have time for this, ask yourself, do I actually don't have time, or is it just not a priority? And again, you get to decide what you want to make it a priority.
I hope it answers your question.
Yeah.
I mean, look at it this way. You made time to watch this podcast, so again, you're allocating time. So
Oh.
what else do we have?
Okay, so next question is, I feel like I'm getting panic attacks a lot. I don't know what to do. I think this is something probably we work with clients as well.
Yeah, most of the time when we talk about panic attack, it's like it's feeling out of breath and like it's impending doom. So it's a very scary feeling. So of course it can feel very helpless, but rest assured, it is something that we can learn how to cope better and things like that. So with that, just understanding what it is first is very important, right?
A panic attack, it lasts us between 15 to 20 minutes, right? The peak at least. And to get through that peak is where it's like important.
Yeah.
And I think there are like some techniques. Have you guys, maybe introduced any techniques with clients?
Said about panic attack, right? Usually it is like at the peak and it wouldn't last, reaches that peak and then it subside after some time because your body also can't keep up with that like hyperventilating state for too long. It will eventually go down. So that is for you to know that if you do find yourself experiencing that panic attack, although it feels very scary, it feels like impending doom, it can feel like you're dying quite literally. Rest assured that this is a state of panic your body is in that perhaps over time has learned as like okay, I'm in danger, I need to escape, so maybe it's preparing for you to run, but in reality there isn't that need to run, but it's just that this mode your body is getting into. So how do you make it bearable, like you said, about within that time frame? How do you make it bearable? So one of the key strategies is grounding yourself in reality, because something is happening in your mind that is telling like this is the worst, something's about to happen to me, I'm in danger. So you need to signal your mind that you're actually safe. So what is going to signal that kind of safety to you is like being grounded in reality, in the moment where you are in this room. You might be in a scary place, perhaps like a presentation is coming up, it's scary but you're not in danger. A few techniques to ground yourself, and the quickest way would be using your senses. Quickest thing so far with the things that I've experimented with clients as well is sour candy, because sour candy does give you that punch of flavor, and then like there's no way you can ignore that flavor and get into your mind. Your mind will catch that sourness. So there can be a lot of other senses that we can use also to ground ourselves. So anything on your mind?
Yeah, I think because like when you're in that state, you're in your head, right? So it's about bringing it back to your body. So sometimes even if you're standing, it's about making sure you're sitting something a bit more like solid and secure. Like
Yes.
Not like that.
Not like that.
So like the security you get from like being stable. Again, it's also actually using your senses, because what you are feeling then is the feeling, it's the sensation that you're getting. So that's your sense of touch, where you suddenly feel that you're firmer. There's like more support for you. So one of the others is actually like it works for anxiety, works for panic attacks, which is the also grounding technique, same one with the senses, but you use 5 of them. And that one usually they will tell you to kind of count down I think you've used this before, like 5 things that you see,
Mm.
4 things you hear, 4 things you touch, sorry, yeah. Three things you hear, then 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that one sometimes I think for those who are perhaps maybe it's too intense, you can't do it, just go for one. You know, like Nangi and Sierra said, there's a sense of touch, there's a sense of taste. There's also sight if you're in a room and you can start counting off like the panels on the wall or the
Tiles.
the tiles on the floor, things like that. You can just keep counting your fingers actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then start again. So anything. The main point of the grounding is to take your mind off the panic that is actually happening. It also helps sometimes if you are a person who is accompanying someone who is having a panic attack. You can actually help. You can provide like just being there, letting them hold your hand. If you're very close to the person, you can actually tap so that they can, they can focus on that instead, or they can focus on the heartbeat or the breathing. You can actually try to get them to breathe in tandem with you. That will also slowly bring the breathing back to normal. And then after that, what it does is it helps you kind of calm down, and then your brain starts to register that it's like, oh, okay, adrenaline needs to
Yes.
stop already. We're fine.
Yeah.
And if you notice that the panic attacks are happening quite a bit, maybe communicating it with a close friend, like telling them that this is happening or there's like a presentation coming out and I foresee this happening and like this is how you can help me if it happens.
Yeah.
Like something you can do, get them to a quiet place or things like that. Of course, it's not easy to open up to someone about this. Maybe you don't want your close friends to know. And that's why, like, although it's important to get through that panic attack wave, there may be more things underlying it, right? More anxieties about why these certain situations are triggering you. And that's where, once again, it comes back to like looking into it and talking about it with a professional that maybe certain situations are triggering that anxiety a bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the counselors come in. So usually, after the initial panic attack, if you keep having it, you most likely are getting triggered by something.
Yeah.
And it's that something that you normally would come to a counselor to talk about, to discover, and then to basically work on.
Covered that one. Moving on to the
Moving
next one.
on. Okay. The next question is, what should I do when I feel empty and sometimes homesick?
One of the things that you would end up doing is withdraw, right? That's normally what happens when you're feeling lonely and homesick. You've withdrawn. You're not going out very much, because you're feeling down. So the first thing I would say is go out. Go out where people are. Go to the park, go to a mall. Just go sit somewhere where there is human. There are humans, sorry, pardon my English. There are humans around you. That's the first thing I would say. Don't sit and dwell on what's missing, or how much you're missing home, because yes, you definitely will miss home, especially for those of you who are leaving home for the first times. And then, slowly take the time to this is your chance to explore essentially. Write down certain things that you've never tried or you're curious about or you would like to explore. And then, work towards that. So just give yourself some goals that require you to step out of your residence or your house, and requires you to actually be around people. That would probably be the first thing I'd say.
And easing into the process too, like, if you've just moved out of home to a new country, maybe you need to call back home a little more. Maybe you need to text a family member a little more, and you don't need to take this approach of like just completely separating very quickly. So like easing into it, and then as you develop your own life here, it like fills up those gaps naturally.
And yeah, that being said, it is understandable that it is a period of adjustment where like you are leaving a familiar place and then being put in a completely new environment that can bring up this sort of like feelings, homesickness, emptiness. I was like, yeah, pondering a bit more on the emptiness. So that is something that, is it just coming from homesickness, or what else is contributing to that? That is something to explore. Again, with the counselor would be the best way to understand where is that coming from also.
We're doing so much pimping.
In this period of adjustment, yeah, easing into it, something that's very important. So instead of like completely letting it go, balancing that with that personal responsibility of like what you can do. Well, you are in this environment, new environment now, so while you still keep in touch with your roots, like to not miss home entirely, how you can slowly either learning a comfort food from home,
Mhm.
like the recipe of
Yeah.
it, like that is something that you can remind yourself of home.
Perhaps another thing you could keep in mind is similar to when you decide to come here, when you're coming to new countries, what you can look forward to rather than what you're leaving behind. To just a little change in the viewpoint.
And throughout all of this, it's also remembering that you're not in this alone. So, being an
Yeah.
international student here, there's lots of international students here. There's an international student club.
Mm.
There's events for international students. There's a lot of opportunities to share and relate your experiences, so you don't have to go through it alone. There are maybe seniors who can also you can learn from how they navigated like that empty
Yeah.
feeling or the homesickness. So immersing yourself in these situations with these people is like another approach to take, especially as a university student.
Yeah, whether you're an international student or someone who's like from outstation staying in from a different state, now you're staying here in this completely new state. Yeah, there are still things like there are like clubs in society, areas of anything at all that sparks your interest, being more involved with those extracurricular activities, just things happening on campus is a good way to to feel supported. It is not easy, as we mentioned earlier.
Okay, so we're ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay. So the next question is, if I go for counseling, how do I know when I'm better already or when do I stop? I think this is something we get from our client, especially like the first sessions is usually like, how long is this going to take?
Yeah.
When do I know when I don't have to like come anymore?
The most straightforward answer to that is only you can tell.
Yes. Yeah.
We're not even like joking. It's because every individual takes a different time. There is no hard and fast rule like within 6 sessions or within 12 sessions, or you have to be done by a year, 2 years. There are people who go for regular counseling for more than 5 years, and it's just an ongoing process. There are some who come in the first session and then they're done because they feel, I'm okay with this. There are some who come a little more, and there's some who come a little less. It's not really less than one, but essentially, it's just up to you. Because when we talk about benchmarking, when you're ready, it's you. You will tell me when you're ready. If you have a counselor and you're doing sessions and your counselor says, you seem to be making good progress, I think maybe we could start working on ending sessions by the next session. But you're like, I'm not ready, I don't feel ready. The counselor will not cut you off. They'll continue because you are not ready, you don't feel ready. The actual choice when to end sessions lies with you.
And that being said is also where like certain things can be goal specific, and once the goal is achieved, that's not to say like you'll be like, yeah, okay, we are done, complete, full stop. It's also something that can continue, perhaps with lesser frequency of it, because what we also want to encourage in counseling is that emotional independence. If you, of course, it doesn't have counseling or therapy journey doesn't have to stop at one setting, right? After that,
Yes.
once you're out working, and you can also start anew with a different counselor. So yeah, in terms of progress, maybe a good question to reflect on is like how my past self would have reacted to this current situation, and that's a good way to gauge your progress. I
Very important point about how like determination would happen, and it's important to practice what you gain from the sessions or try it out and have that accountability and communicate it with your counselor also. What you say you faced a situation and you learned the technique in counseling, so you tried it, whether it worked, whether it didn't work, and taking that responsibility so that you can see progress or figure out what works and doesn't work for you, and we can cater it to what like works for you best.
Yes, discussing that, what's working, what's not working, practicing the techniques and everything, and communicating with your counselor is very important, and communicating it honestly. That's not the space for you to try to either please the counselor or like try to like oh, if I say this, will it hurt my counselor? Again, this is not about us, this is about you.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it is about what is going to be helpful for you.
Yeah.
So
You know, that's a, sorry.
Yes,
I
go
go
ahead.
off.
No, go ahead.
That's a very important point, right? The
Yeah.
people pleasing, the impression management, things like that. It can happen because you're forming this relationship with us, but even that, it's important to be honest about that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I find myself, feeling this, like I don't want to say this because I'm afraid it might like hurt
Right.
your feelings.
Mm.
Or there's even like examples of not wanting to stop counseling because you're afraid of hurting the counselor's feeling. Like, I don't need you anymore. And so it's important to also communicate that. Don't judge yourself if it's happening, but bring it up with us. Coming back to the question of how do I know when to stop, I think we have covered it. Sometimes it's more measurable. You can see that the goals were met. Sometimes it's just a feeling like, yeah, maybe I don't need to go back, and you can choose to maybe take a break, try out,
Yeah, it's
just
completely
putting a
okay.
pause or stopping completely, and then you can communicate with your counselor. If you don't feel like it, that's okay too. Sometimes it really just happens that way.
Also, yeah, the key thing is that us counselors, we value that honesty, we value that transparency. That is very important to this entire process.
Okay.
Kiddos.
So
Let's
it's a
hear
bit of
it.
a long question, so let me just paraphrase it.
Mhm.
Basically, this person is saying that ever since they were little, they've always been chasing love and a relationship, for the sake of getting away from loneliness. And how do they stop chasing this?